Hello and welcome to The Other Marthas, the show where a drama student and a film graduate try to make sense of things we wish we were qualified in instead. A quick disclaimer before we get started, we don't claim to be experts in any of the fields we'll be discussing, so while everything we say will be based on individual research, this is just a bit of fun and we suggest you take everything we say with a pinch of salt. I'm Martha, I'm the drama student.
And I'm the other Martha, the film graduate.
So Martha, what are we talking about today?
Today we are talking about Earth's highest peak.
Mount Everest. Yeah. I thought you were just leaving it there, and I was like, I should possibly clarify.
Yeah.
I am doing this episode with an unexpected glass of Prosecco.
Look at you.
Because, well, I know, because my sister and her boyfriend have sort of secured a house, long story short, which is great. But it does mean, I'll be talking about Everest, obviously, has some really tragic stories. We'll be talking about those. So sort of, as I get further down my glass and get more into the fatalities of the night, I might be getting a little bit flippant with it. But we can just hope not. Martha can do a little signal of, oh my God, stop.
We'll just put a warning, by the way, Martha was drunk through the whole episode. Well, I am drinking a cool, tall glass of water.
Oh, lovely.
That's my beverage of choice. It is always my beverage of choice.
Mine is generally tea, but...
I like to drink things that are part of me.
Okay, so just water and blood.
I don't drink blood, I just mean water, but yeah.
Right.
No, it's too salty for me.
Yeah, it would be really cloying, I think.
Yeah, like warm, salty.
Whoa. And very... I feel like it would coat your mouth and just be really hard to actually get down.
Yeah, I suppose like an entire sip of blood. And it would be hard to source.
Yeah. Well, you could just nosebleed a bit.
Yeah, I went for a different orifice.
Okay, well, I would probably prefer to drink nose blood than, vagina blood. But I mean, neither of us are drinking blood tonight, so there's no need to go into that. Right, so Everest.
The first chronological thing I want to tell you is that the guy that Everest is named after, he did some discovering of it but didn't name it. He either died or got bored before. Now,
I'm not being rude, but how hard is it to discover the world's biggest mountain? Would you not?
Well, obviously he didn't discover it. I'm sure there were people that actually live near the mountain and were like,
staked a claim upon it.
Our mountain. One of the first white men to adventure to Everest.
As is often the way.
He actually pronounced his name Everest, not Everest.
Oh.
So, first of all, that's not how Everest is pronounced. And second of all, it definitely had a name before it was Everest.
Yeah, do you have any more sort of early stuff before I get started on 1996?
No, because to be honest, it was all absolutely boring. Well, no, that's not true. There was Mallory and what's his face?
Hillary
what's he called?
Tenzin.
Yeah. Why did I think he was called Gay something? Was he called like Gaynor Tenzin?
Idea. I only know who Sherpa Tenzin, and I don't know if then the native Tibetan guides who are called Sherpas are named after him because his name was Sherpa Tenzin, or if he's only ever referred to as Sherpa Tenzin because Sherpa maybe means guide or whatever in Tibetan. And
Doctor Who.
Exactly. It's not like Jonathan Who. We don't know what his name is, and that's actually a big part of the plot. So maybe that was it. Maybe Sherpa Tenzin's first name would have just imploded the universe.
His name is John Smith.
The Doctor. Yeah, but that's like his sort of code name, isn't it?
Yeah. Yeah. Anyway,
right.
I have no early stuff because a lot of it was boring to my mind.
Excellent. In that case, we're going to crack on and jump in, to no one's surprise, in 1996. It's May the 10th to the 11th of May, 1996, and it's the biggest disaster that Everest has seen at that point. It's the third deadliest season there's ever been on Everest. 8 people died just on this one sort of 2-day period due to a huge storm. That's of 12 people who died that season in total. Since then, we've had 16 deaths in 2014 due to an avalanche, and then 22 from avalanches caused by the earthquake in Nepal in April 2015. So those are the only 2 occasions that have been deadlier than that, both involving avalanches. This one was just some hella bad weather.
Isn't it like there's around, is it like 200 bodies on Everest?
I actually don't know figures. There are a lot, because...
There are a lot. Oh, corpses on Everest.
Yes. It's very hard to recover them. I think it's easy to misunderstand, not to patronize people here. Maybe it was just me who was slightly misunderstanding prior to researching this properly. But if someone dies above the Hillary Step, so sort of on the south summit of the mountain, they pretty much cannot get down ever, because the Hillary Step is a cliff that you abseil down, which I think actually now has been destroyed in an avalanche, but either way there are steps, which are basically cliff faces that you have to abseil down, on the north and the south approaches. What are you looking scandalized about, Martha?
Okay, I have a fact, and then I just need to tell you a disturbing thought I had.
All right.
So, a total of 295 people have died on both sides of the mountain since 1924. Nearly 300. At least 200 bodies are spread across the mountain on various routes. Some are very deep in crevasses, which often, if it's possible to get to the body but not bring it down, they just chuck it off the side. Yeah,
that's considered the more respectful thing to do, which makes sense, I think.
Rather than trampling on people.
Yeah, shortly after this happened, I think, in fact, in the days following this disaster, one of the people I'm going to talk about, whose name I'm now trying to find.
Can I tell you my disturbing thought while you look?
Yes.
My disturbing thought was, if all of these bodies are like on ridges and the like, in an avalanche, they're gonna start coming down.
Oh, that's a good point. But I guess there'll be such a massive snow that, I mean, what's hitting you doesn't really matter.
Oh, no, he was. I'm not weird.
Who was what?
Tenzing Norgay was the name of the guy.
Okay, cool. So presumably Sherpa does mean something like guide. Apologies, you've not thought to look
this up, no.
But if you know.
No, wrong guy. Wait. Oh my god. Am I stupid? No. Tenzing Norgay, also referred to Sherpa Tenzing, was Nepali Indian Sherpa mountaineer. He was one of the first 2 individuals known to reach the summit of Mount Everest, which he accomplished with Edmund Hillary, 29th of May, 1953.
Yes, indeed.
There we are.
In which case maybe Sherpa is originally a Tibetan term, I don't know. Sorry, a Nepalese term. I thought it was Tibetan, but what do I know? Not a lot.
I think it is just like, a Brummie. You know, like, I think it's just like, they're from this place. Cool. That's
possibly.
Or like Italian.
Yeah.
What do they call them? Neapolitan people.
Neapolitan, yes.
Yeah, like classy. I think it must be like that. Anyway, tell me your tale of grief.
Finding bodies.
Yes.
Someone on the South African team was found a few days after the storm, having summited after the storm, by Bukrier, whom I shall talk about further in this story, just hanging from ropes. And he was appalled by the fact that no one had cut him down yet. And it is seen as the more respectful thing to do is to cut them down and push them over the edge, because then you're not sort of being looked at all the time, I suppose. It would be quite odd. But then also, I know Sherpas generally don't want to move people's bodies because in their culture, the spirit departs the body over a 3-day period, and you can never really tell how recently someone's died, and you don't want to interfere with that. So it's
in the book that I read, I read a book. I'm back on form. I read a book about
Very cool. I watched several documentaries on YouTube.
We're just like falling back into the book I read, Dark Summit by Nick Heel. So I'm blaming any misinformation on Nick. He said that it was because a lot of Sherpas are Buddhist, and
yes, that's true.
So it's in Buddhism that it's not good to touch the body.
Yeah, sorry, I think it is specifically a Buddhist thing, the 3-day thing as well.
Okay, cool.
But yes,
we're in agreement. Right.
Anyway,
Well, I think without any further ado, please traumatise me with 1996.
This is the infamous storm that happened on the 10th to 11th of May 1996, in which 8 people died. I've got a list of people involved, but that's more for my reference than yours. So basically, we start off at midnight, just after midnight on the morning of the 10th of May, from Camp 4, which basically, if you imagine a map of Everest, I guess, base camp where you start off is maybe halfway up the mountain, would you say?
Well, because there's like base camp where people like tourists can go.
Yeah, and then there's base camp where you start
camp.
your advanced base camp. That's the one. So that's maybe halfway up the mountain, and then you have Camp 1, Camp 2, Camp 3, and Camp 4 going in ascending order as you would imagine. And Camp 4 is right on the kind of line where it becomes the death zone. So that's the sort of last place you can spend the night safely. And from Camp 4, it tends to take quite a while to reach the summit. If you're attempting to summit the mountain, you go from Camp 4 and get back down within the day. Otherwise, you will almost certainly die. And so to maximise time, you generally leave just after midnight so that you can get to the summit some point before 2 p.m. 2 p.m. is the normal kind of cut-off turnaround time that gives you enough time to get safely back down to Camp 4. Most people die on the descent.
Yes, I've heard this
which,
too.
Yeah, I suppose at least means that they'll have been able to see the summit, which you'd assume is a big deal to anyone climbing Everest, but still maybe not to trade for your life.
Yes, well, I have a quote about that. So I will interject every now and then with fun little quotes. Please from do. Nick. Our friend
I'll sick my Prosecco.
You sick that Prosecco.
Dear God, I've literally had maybe an inch. It's just
Oh yeah, I can see that.
Yeah.
Okay, this is so bizarre. Okay, right. Yeah, so in my story, there's a guy called Russell Bryce, which you'll hear a lot about, but his team 2006 radioed him and they were like, hey, we're at the summit, and he was like, cool, you're halfway then. Because I think if, like, a lot of people think of climbing Everest as reaching the summit, but actually it's coming back down after reaching the summit, which really is where my Hamilton quote comes in. Ooh. Dying is easy, young man. Living is
harder. Oh, nice. Yeah, it's sort of what they always say when you radio to base camp or Camp 4 or wherever you're radioing to, saying, I'm at the summit. They'll say, well done, get down now. Sort of whatever time it is. So to continue the timeline, there are 2 teams going up the mountain. Well, 2 sort of large teams that we're going to be focusing on. There are a few other smaller teams at the same time. The teams we're going to be focusing on are the Adventure Consultants, led by Rob Hall. This is a New Zealand group. And the Mountain Madness
New Zealand group
team. Woohoo! Oh, fun! Led by Scott Fisher, who I believe are an American group.
Is he a baddie, Scott Fisher?
Well, no, he doesn't chuck everyone else off the mountain.
Oh, okay, just because I want to say I really like his name.
It's a good name, isn't it? Yeah, anyway, so just after midnight on the 10th, the Adventure Consultants head out from Camp 4 atop the South Col, which is about 25,900 feet.
Wait, so sorry, I'm stupid. So, were your lot attacking from the south?
Attacking?
That's
climbing from the south. Yes, I think so. But also,
cool.
At the same time, I'm not well enough versed on Everest that I know if the South Col means it's on the south side or if it's just south.
I think it does.
Okay.
I think South Col means on the south side and North Col means it's on the north side.
That makes great sense.
I think, because there's like, apparently climbing the south side is a lot harder than climbing the north side, which is why most people climb the north
side. Yes, so they set out just after midnight. The Mountain Madness team follow shortly afterwards. There's initially
not a very good name. I'm so sorry I keep interrupting, but imagine being in a team called Mountain Madness. Like, you're gonna be stressed.
Yeah, so Scott Fisher, who was leading this team, was kind of known for his slightly like wacky approach to climbing Everest.
Good. We love that. We love a wacky climber.
But he had been up several times himself, was very experienced. I think this was his first group of clients, as far as I know, that were going up, but he himself was a veteran climber. Rob Hall from the Adventure Consultants team was not only a veteran climber, but also a veteran group leader. So he had, he'd helped some sort of 38, I think it is, people to summit before this. He really knew what he was doing.
Okay.
Just some context. So initially there's some delays with ropes not being properly set up yet at the balcony, which is at 27,400 feet, or at the Hillary Step. No, which is at 28,740 feet. The Hillary Step no longer exists. I believe it's been buried by avalanches, but it was generally acknowledged to be the most difficult part of climbing Everest from the south side.
So has that made climbing Everest from the south side easier or harder?
I don't know. I'd be really interested to know that. Not interested enough to have looked it up before this podcast, but interested enough to be told it by someone who knows.
Yeah. Okay. Well.
But yeah, so there are a few basic rope delays. We don't really know what's happened there because, unfortunately, the people who could have told us didn't necessarily come back. Obviously, it's a lot more unfortunate that they didn't come back than that we don't know why the ropes weren't there, but you get me. Anyway, because of this, there was a bit of a bottleneck at the Hillary Step. As I've described before, it's when you're going down, it's basically abseiling down a cliff. When you're going up, you're kind of pulling yourself up a rope. You've got your ice axes. It's a very laborious process. And there are about 33 climbers trying to attempt the summit that day. So they're waiting a long time. So there's quite a few delays. At this point, 3 climbers decide to turn back because they're worried they won't have enough supplementary oxygen now that they've spent all this time waiting at the Hillary Step. Yes.
Oh, okay, so they hadn't yet pulled themselves up the step.
No, yeah, that would be a weird thing to do. It's
because you're like halfway up the step and you're like, I've just had them coming down, and then you like slide down the rope and knock everyone underneath you down.
Yeah, no, it was more a case of like each person is taking a good 15 minutes. There are 33 of us. I didn't account for this when I brought the oxygen.
Okay.
So these 3 climbers very sensibly turn back. Now, the first person to summit on the 10th is Anatoly Bukharev. I'm sorry if I'm saying that wrong.
Yes, there's a lot of names in this that we might mispronounce.
There's a lot of international teams, and so it's just names we're not as familiar with.
I know I'll mispronounce names, that's for sure.
Yeah, likewise. So he summits at 1307, and he has summited. He's one of the guides from, I believe, the Rob Hall's group, which is the Adventure Consultants group. So he summits first with no supplemental oxygen. He sticks around for about an hour and a half to help other climbers to the summit. Then at about 2:30, he heads back down. Bearing in mind the normal cutoff point for achieving the summit is 2. So he's sticking his neck out a little bit just by staying up there that long. People really should not be continuing to summit at this time. But
so he had no oxygen.
No oxygen.
Okay, cool.
I think that's what no supplementary oxygen means. No tanks. You just like, I can breathe. Which normally, for most people, fair statement. Everest, anyway.
Yeah, well, it's because there's like, basically people are like, oh, well, everyone's climbing Everest with oxygen nowadays, so
it's
I'm
not
gonna
impressive
do it
anymore.
Without.
Yeah, which, I mean, I get, it's your life, but at the same time, well, that's kind of the stuff we'll get onto, I guess, is the ethics of it. But anyway, so when Bukharev heads down at 2:30 p.m, all of the Mountain Madness clients have summited. Scott Fisher, who's leading them, has not, but he's still on his way up. Most of the Adventure Consultants have also summited. Beck Weathers, which is a name you may be familiar with, I can certainly see Martha is, who is also climbing with Hall's team. For you. Oh yeah?
Wait, who was he climbing with?
He was climbing with Rob Hall's team, so with the Adventure Consultants.
Okay.
Yeah. He is one of the clients of Rob Hall's team who has not summited because he has recently undergone a routine eye surgery for nearsightedness, which has made micro incisions in his corneas, and the altitude has basically made him blind. Temporarily, but he's still blind, and you don't want that when you're climbing Everest.
You don't want that.
No, bearing in mind there's, just the obvious, you don't want to be, when you're climbing and everywhere you put your limbs counts, you don't want to be unable to see and unused to being unable to see. Anyway, so Beck Weathers, at some point around the south summit or the balcony, I think, has stopped climbing, and Rob Hall has said, okay, Beck, you're going to stay here. You're not going to go down unassisted, because that's stupid, because you're blind and you're not used to being blind. Promise me that you will stay where you are until I come back. And Beck says, of course I will. You can probably imagine.
I'm blind on Mount Everest.
Yeah, obviously, and you have climbed this so many times. However, with an ominous statement like that, you can perhaps imagine where this is going to go. So, back on the summit, people are generally starting to head down at this point, as they well should, but Rob Hall is still waiting at the summit for one of his clients, Doug Hansen. Doug has climbed with Hall before, and he actually attempted to summit Everest the previous year, but he hadn't managed to. So now he is so determined to summit. Some of the Sherpas at the summit offer to help Hansen up the last bit, but Rob Hall says, no, don't worry, I'll keep an eye on Doug. You guys just help the rest of them down, it's fine. So they do. It's also perhaps important to note that Rob Hall also says, stash some oxygen tanks on your way. Pretty much everyone is on the way down, except for Rob Hall, who's on the summit, waiting for Doug Hansen, who's on his way to the summit, and also Scott Fisher, who summits at 3:45. Again, ooh, this isn't ideal, and as a leader, he should probably have known better than this, but then again, I'm sure he can call that judgment I'm sure he could have called that judgment. You know what, actually, I'm just going to leave it there.
Okay.
Yeah, Fisher summits at 3:45. He's quite exhausted and he seems to be growing ill, probably with HAPE or HACE, which is high altitude pulmonary or cerebral edema.
I've heard many a tale of those.
I'm not entirely sure how it works in the lungs with pulmonary edema. I can only assume it's a similar process, but I know in the brain there's an excess of fluid, so it swells, I believe, and you start hallucinating, and often people then have trouble with if there's someone trying to help them down, they'll just fight them. They can get really lethargic, things like that. I assume there's a similar deal with swelling in the lungs, pulmonary edema.
So I also found in my research that a lot of the causes for the edemas is because of the altitude.
Yeah.
Because of, obviously, people acclimatized to the altitude and the cold and the oxygen. So their blood thickens and it runs really, really thick.
Oof. And
so often the clots form and cause edema and strokes as well, because
which has got to be terrifying, because
your blood is gooey and thick.
Yeah, and that's not really something you can predict until you've been up that high. So
well, apparently it's apparently climbers like drink excessive amounts of water and take lots and lots of aspirin. Because it thins the blood. So you can also go blind from cerebral edema.
Yes, true. Meanwhile, there's a small Taiwanese team who's also summiting that day, led by Gao Mingho, or Makalu, as he's generally known. So I'm going to call him that. Again, apologies if I'm mispronouncing that. Makalu summits after Fisher, so he's also not doing great for time. And Doug Hansen, whom Rob Hall is waiting for, actually has to be helped up by Rob Hall, or possibly, I couldn't quite determine from the reports that I was going to say read, let's be honest, listened to, whether Rob Hall just went down to him and was like, look, no, we have to go down, or if he went down to him to help him up and then down. Either way, this is a group of people who should not be so high up on the mountain, who are very high up on the mountain.
Do we know why everyone seems to be so late today?
I think, well, sometimes it just happens, but then also, to be fair, I mean, the 2 o'clock turnaround point is an indicator. Most people had turned around by 2:30, which isn't unusual, you know, that's good. So really the only people in trouble were Fisher, Makalu Gao, and Doug Hansen. and Rob Hall has stayed to help Doug Hansen.
Okay.
So I don't think it's that unusual. And normally people who are in a bit of a desperate state can still get back down the mountain if there's not a massive blizzard.
Oh, okay, yeah.
Yeah. Talking of which, a blizzard kind of starts getting a little bit nasty around 3-ish. Climbers are starting to struggle on their descent, understandably. They can't really see where they're going. Several parties on their descent pass Beck Weathers, remember him, blind, on their descent, and they're like, Beck, what are you doing here? Come back with us. And he's like, no, I'm waiting for Rob Hall. Rob Hall said, promise, wait for me. So he stays.
Okay. That's interesting, because I think, and no offense to Rob Hall and no offense to Beck Weathers, but I think if I was blind on the top of Everest and people who knew me, or even people I didn't know, were like, come down with us, I might be tempted to go with them.
I agree, but at the same time, obviously it's important to point out, in all of the decisions that are being made here, towards the summit of Everest in the death zone, we're at 1/3 of the level of oxygen that you have at sea level. And so people's decisions will be altered by that. But also, I think just the fact that Rob Hall was so sure of himself, and it's not, out of everyone on Everest that day, if someone is going to get Beck Weathers down the mountain, it's Rob Hall.
Yes, I suppose so. And you would have a certain trust in someone who said, wait for me, I will get you down.
Exactly. I think it's just the certainty.
I just think that I would, even at low oxygen, be more of someone who, because I'm quite risk averse, I think I would be like, okay, well, I just want to get down now.
Yeah. And then hopefully I can radio Rob when I'm down and be like, hi, I'm down.
Yes, that's the only thing I was thinking, is like, if he gets to where you were and
then dies trying to find you, yeah. But that shouldn't happen because of the radio system. But yes. Well, eventually Beck Weathers does go down with other people because it's getting late. He's getting worried. He is just kind of sitting. You're well done, Beck. He's just kind of sitting on a ledge, and Mike Groom, who's one of the I've put AC guide, and to me that reads as Animal Crossing, what they call adventure consultants. He's one of the guides, and he passes Beck, and Beck blindly goes, Mike, is that you? He's like, yes. So I've got a bit of a problem. I know. Says, I've got a bit of a problem. I can't really see. And Mike's like, all right, sort of, can you move? Yes, cool. Hold on to me, and I'll kind of guide you. So he does, which obviously kind of hampers Mike's descent a bit, but it's still going. I think one of the climbers, Yasuko Namba, who's the oldest woman to summit Everest at the time, and had now, having summited Everest, completed the 7 summits challenge, I guess, which is where you try to summit all of the highest peak in every continent, I think.
Oh, okay, that's fun.
It's really cool. It's also what Beck Weathers was trying to do, but obviously he didn't make it to the summit. But yeah, Yasuko is also in a bad way. And so Mike, at this point, has Yasuko drooping on one arm and Beck kind of with a hand on his shoulder stumbling after him. So a good guide. Well done, Mike. Meanwhile, Makalu Gao and Scott Fisher make it to the balcony, and neither of them can go any further. They are both ill. The Sherpas who have summited with Gao say we'll try and figure out a way down, because at this point the blizzard is making it really hard to see where they're going. So they say we'll try and figure out a way down and then we'll come back for you. And Fisher's Sherpa stays with him, but when it becomes evident that the Sherpas with Gao aren't coming back, and I should say this is because they couldn't get back up, not because they decided to leave him, Fisher sends the other Sherpa down as well and says, leave us. So Fisher and Gao are stranded on the balcony. Somewhere around 5 in the afternoon, Rob Hall radios for help. He and Doug are above the Hillary Step, so they're still on the south summit, and Doug is in a bad way. I believe Hall has radioed to Camp 4 rather than base camp. Like, I'm sure it would be relayed in both places anyway. But at Camp 4, they say, Doug's not going to make it. Save yourself, Rob. You'll be okay. And Rob's only response is, we're both listening, which...
Sorry, who is Doug?
Sorry, Doug Hansen. This is the guy that Rob Hall was waiting for.
Cool.
Sorry, I'm kind of switching between first names and surnames. Apologies.
Well, that's fine. As long now I know Doug Hansen, because I was like, wait a minute, who else is here?
Yeah. Yeah. So he just says we're both listening.
That is awkward,
isn't it? Isn't it?
It's like being on speakerphone when you're talking about someone that's there.
Well, can't you just like tell her that you have something on? No, it's like that, but kind of times a million.
Or like you're on the phone with your friend, you're like, oh, I really don't like Susan, and they're like, so Susan's in the car with me.
Yeah. Hi, Susan. Yes. Later, Hall radios again. He says Doug is now unconscious. I need help.
No, you don't need help. Save yourself.
I know, but again, this guy, I don't know if he'd managed to save people in these situations before, or if he was just refusing to leave a client.
Well, I think that's very noble.
Incredibly noble, possibly to a fault.
Yes.
Andy Harris, who I believe is another of the guides from the Adventure Consultants Group, heads up alone from the South Summit carrying supplementary oxygen to try and help Doug Hansen and Rob Hall. By 6 o'clock, there's a full-on blizzard. Several climbers are completely lost on the South Col, including Beck Weathers and his posse, which is Mike and Jessica. They basically wander around for several hours and then go, okay, if we keep wandering around having no idea where we are, we'll fall into either Nepal or Tibet.
That's very interesting that they would wander, because I think if I was on the path and the blizzard starts, I mean, obviously you don't know how long a blizzard's going to be or exposed, but I would be tempted to be like, okay, well, I know that this is the ground.
Path. Yeah, I think the thing is, because it's not such a clear-cut path on the south side, and because they had been descending in this like already very fierce blizzard, they probably wouldn't have known exactly at which point they didn't know where they are. They were just like, we should be able to see the tents by now, and we can't.
No, I agree. Oh, I see. So they didn't realise they were lost until they were already off the
exactly.
path. Okay, but at the same time, I think if I couldn't see much in front of me, I think I'd be like, okay, well, I've not yet fallen off the mountain, so I think I'll stop, which it seems like they did eventually.
They did, yeah. To be fair, I don't know how long they were wandering before they went, maybe we should stop so we don't fall
off the mountain.
And so they make a huddle. They're all just huddled together, kind of, trying to keep moving, keep each other warm.
I'm gonna cry. That's so cute.
I know, isn't it? And they're like that for about 6 hours. I know. Near midnight, the storm starts to abate ever so slightly, and the team can see Camp Fort only about 200 meters away. But if they'd gone in the wrong 200 meters, they'd have fallen off the mountain. So what can they do? Yeah. But at this point, they're like, oh, thank Christ, I can see tents. Let's go. Most of the team head back. Some of them, unsurprisingly, aren't able to at this point, but they are alive and conscious. And so those who are heading back to Camp 4 say, stay here, we'll send help immediately. They get into camp. They alert Bakria, who is the first guy who summited and came down pretty early. He immediately goes out to find the survivors, and he relays the 3 Mountain Madness climbers back to camp. But Beckweathers and Yasuko Namba are basically left for dead. Not at random. They obviously will have taken back the people that they thought were most likely to survive. So that's the night. It's now the 11th of May. It's 4:43 a.m. Rob Hall radios base camp from the South Summit. They ask what his situation is. All he'll say is that Doug is gone and that Andy Harris got to them, but now he's missing. 2 climbers immediately set out to rescue him. So they're radioing to Rob Hall saying, don't worry, we're sending out a rescue mission. But they have to turn back before they can reach him, which means that base camp then have to radio to Rob Hall going, hi, no one's coming, which I can only imagine being the hardest thing in the world. And just the weirdness of being in a situation where you're like, okay, well, I'm okay right now, but imminently I will die.
I've seen quite a few climbers say that they, when they had to make the decision to leave someone, they were saying, I'm physically strong enough now to help them, but later I won't be, and so I have
Exactly.
to leave them now. But also I've seen like also a lot of climbers saying that if they were left, they wouldn't blame anyone because they know
took
the
their
score,
life in their hands. Yeah.
and they wouldn't want like four more people coming up after them, and then those people dying, and you're still gonna die.
Exactly. See, it's interesting. I suppose you never know until you're in that situation, and you cannot blame a dying person for saying, "Stay with me."
Oh, well, no, and you wouldn't, even if a climber, like when they're at like camp 4 says, if I'm stuck, if I start dying up there, leave me, for then turning around and going, come and get me, I don't want to die up here.
Yeah, it's like fair enough, you weren't dying when you said leave you, now you are.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah.
That's the thing. You weren't dying alone when you said that.
Exactly. It's such a complex situation, and I'm sure we'll get on to that in not too long, don't worry.
In ages, in years.
Yes. So
it'll be years for us, but it'll be mere minutes for you.
Minutes for you. Rob Hall is patched through to his wife in the afternoon. His wife is 7 months pregnant, so they have a chat. They name their child, and he.
Oh my god, that's so sad.
I know it's, and he says, "Don't worry too much." As far as I know, and given sort of what it seemed from his character thus far, I think he continued to descend, because I guess why not try? But
oh yeah, like if there's the chance that you either will die slowly at the top of the mountain, or
will die slowly while walking.
Sorry, my iPad is pinging endlessly.
It really is.
Oh my god, I'm not this popular. I promise it's. Shh. Hush now, my darling. Shush. It's like I'm smothering it.
Jesus. Yeah, we were saying so, you can either die.
Yes, if either your choice is I stay here and I die, definitely, or I try to descend and I might fall off or
run out of oxygen or freeze.
Run out of oxygen or break my leg and have to sit somewhere and die. At least you tried.
Exactly. Which I believe is what he did. But unfortunately, his body was then found on May 23rd, so he didn't make it.
So this is Robert Hall.
This is Rob Hall.
And he was the leader of the adventure consultants.
That's right.
Okay, so he's the guy who was like, I'm staying with my client.
Yeah. Yeah, so this guy is unquestionably an absolute hero, possibly stubborn in what he thought he was capable of, but amazing, amazing person, clearly. Meanwhile, this is still on the 11th of May, Stuart Hutchison, who is one of Hall's clients, goes out to search again for Beck Weathers and Yasko Namba. He finds them both. They're both still breathing, but at this point, they're effectively in hypothermic comas. And so they kind of conclude, there's no way we can evacuate these guys alongside the other survivors of last night safely, and these guys are almost certainly going to die. So they prioritise the people whom they know they can get to safety. Which, again, might seem cold, but you have to make a decision. And
well, yes, it's one of those, like, you can only, like, between whoever was there, they can only carry a certain amount of people or only help a certain amount of people.
Exactly. You might as well help the ones that you think will actually make it, unfortunately, is the way it has to be. So he leaves them again. They're declared dead. Their families are informed that they are dead. Ah, yes, also in the morning of the 11th,
God, the 11th of May is like, that's a stressful day.
I know. Well, the thing is, I think it's because the 10th started fine and got chaotic. So the 11th is when everyone is trying to find everyone, and all this stuff happens. Sherpas locate Scott Fisher and Makalu Gao. Both of them are alive, but Fisher is in a pretty desperate state. They attempt to perform CPR on him, but they have to leave him where he is because they can't get him down if he can't walk himself. Gao, however, is rescued. And his story is kind of amazing because it's not much talked about, as far as I know. In that essentially what happened to him was that he got stuck and then got rescued. Obviously, I'm sure it was a whole lot more than that to him, and he lost his hands and his toes and all sorts. But the way he describes it, he's just on this balcony with Fisher. Fisher is just rocking back and forth saying, I'm sick. Gao can't do anything. And so all he's doing is, it pops into his head, he goes, I have to dance disco. to keep him moving. So he's spending the whole night kind of wriggling around trying to jive, which is what keeps him alive, because
that's lovely.
Just moving a little bit, whereas Fisher was completely still.
I thought he was rocking.
I may have added the rocking.
Okay.
It's just how I picture it, but like during the night he was still.
Yes. Well, I've heard that, if you keep moving, that's the best way to not
avoid
get frostbite and
yes,
get hypothermia.
Absolutely. So Gao, thankfully, is rescued. Bukharev tries to go up to get Fisher a second time in the evening, but they find his body completely frozen at about 7 in the evening. So, meanwhile, back at Camp 4.
Oh my God.
I know.
It just doesn't end.
It's nearly done.
Okay. No, I'm not saying anything against you. I just mean, like, imagine if that was your day. Like, I've had a bad day today, which is lots of little things.
Yeah.
Imagine if it's this. My God.
He's everywhere. In the afternoon, in Camp 4, people are sort of, starting to prepare to head down the mountain, and someone stumbles into camp. It's Beck Weathers. He's been left for dead twice. He was left in a hypothermic coma on the South Col, having spent the night there, blind. Beck Weathers stumbles into camp and is like, Jesus Christ, help.
He's like a revenant.
It's incredible. He really is. He's put in a tent. He's given oxygen. He's warmed up. But basically, people are like, he's still gonna die.
Oh no!
Because he's very far gone. The center of his face is totally frostbitten. His hands are completely frostbitten. So they leave him in the tent overnight. The next morning,
does anyone stay in there with him?
Nope. Can
he see yet?
I think he can a bit, but it's still limited, is the impression I get.
Okay.
So the next morning, the survivors are being shepherded down to get medical aid. I think Camp 2 is the sort of nearest point at which they can properly be treated. And people pass Beck's tent and look inside, and they just see a still figure with a sleeping bag over the face, and they go, oh no, that's someone who didn't make it through the night. And they go.
Do they leave him again?
This is the third time.
No!
Beck Weathers cannot catch a break.
Oh my God.
Again, you can see what these people are thinking. It's like, oh wow, this guy, it's incredible that he's managed to be conscious for a little longer than we thought, but he's definitely going, like, people don't survive this, he's going to die.
No, it's fair enough. It's just the fact that it's happened
just
3
so
times.
Incomprehensible, I know. But thankfully, Krakauer, who is another hall client, finds him at the last moment and goes, oh my God, that's Beck Weathers and he's alive. Mobilises a rescue team, and eventually Weathers manages to make it down to Camp 2. He's walking. He's assisted by 8 guys, but he's making his own way down. And from there, he's rescued by a helicopter, which helicopters, I can't remember the actual sort of cut-off altitude point in meters, but Camp 2 is above that, and the helicopter's like, this guy is worth flying a little higher for, and rescues him, and also rescues Gao. So that's the kind of miraculous story that comes out of all this.
What a roller coaster!
I know. So I feel I should say, so the people who died or disappeared, were Doug Hansen disappeared. It appears that Rob Hall, he was with Rob Hall when he died. Rob Hall died, his body was found. Scott Fisher died, his body was found. Yasuko Namba died, her body, she was found before she died. Andy Harris, who went up to help Rob Hall and Doug Hansen, disappeared. And on the same night, 3 climbers from the Tibetan Border Police, Siwang Samanla, Dorje Morup and Siwang Paljor, also died. So it was a really, really catastrophic night, but a bit of a miracle at the end of it.
Well, I'm so happy for Beck Weathers.
I know.
What a roller coaster. The stupid thing is that after reading my Nick Heel book, I actually put on my Goodreads that I wanted to read Beck Weathers' book, and I didn't make the connection that he would have had to have lived to write the book. It's called Left for Dead: My Journey Home from Everest by Beck Weathers.
Yes, I really want to read it. He's a fascinating guy, and he's clearly very cooperative with documentaries and such, because he's on a lot of them.
That's amazing. Wow, I'm so happy for Beck.
I know. He's also a miracle of plastic surgery. They grew, because he effectively lost the middle of his face, they grew a nose upside down going onto his forehead and then just flipped it round. Looks fab. It's so cool.
A couple of quotes for you from Nick, if you'd care to hear them.
Please.
Okay, so I don't know what year this took place. I'd assume it's near to 1996, maybe even that year, because otherwise this is even grosser. So there was this couple who were climbing together on one of the tours that you were speaking about, kind of a lower price one where you basically, it covers your permit to climb and your like time at base camp, like you get a plot at advanced base camp. That's basically what you get. So this couple were on one of those tours with a guy called Henry.
Lovely.
And they were up on Everest, and they radioed Henry for another canister of oxygen and a spare mask.
Right.
And here's the quote. Henry did what he said he would. He got me oxygen and a mask. But Beck Weathers' nose was still in it.
Oh my God. Oh my God.
Like, and then after they received that morbid little package, they came down.
Sensible. Oh my God.
Isn't that...
Imagine that, you're like, oh, thank God. Whoa!
Yeah! It's just a bit grim.
Blimey, yeah.
And then I also have a quote here, again from our friend Neil. Neil, I always call him Neil because it's Nick Heel. Neil.
That makes sense.
About 1996, which I thought you might like.
Please.
By the end of 1996 season, the public perception of Everest had been altered for good. What had once stood as a symbol of what was best in mankind, determination, tenacity, and teamwork, now represented something much darker: ego, hubris, greed.
Yeah.
I just found that interesting.
Yeah, well, it's a weird one because, again, it just in the little bit of the story that I've told, you have the example of Rob Hall, who was very, very tragically lost and most likely wouldn't have been had he not done everything he could for a fellow climber. Exactly. But then you also have Beck Weathers, who was in dire straits and still managed to survive, which is very much an argument for, even if they look like they're at death's door, they can still be brought back. So it's a really, really difficult one. Another thing, actually, that, sorry, I will leave off really soon. Another thing I find really interesting about Everest stories is how people can be on the mountain at the same time, but just be weirdly, not unaffected, but their paths will intersect. Some of them may die, but the rest of them are still just on their climb. Like the first I heard about the 1996 disaster from another documentary, primarily about the South African team, who came under quite a lot of fire because they did not attempt the summit on the 10th, but they were also very potentially uncooperative on the night where the rescue from the South Col was taking place. There are all these frozen people coming in. Buchareve is going back and forth trying to bring more people from the South Col. But I only heard about that in the documentary. You know, the South African team were going, yeah, no, obviously it was a really stormy night. It was quite scary in the tent. And, you know, we heard about Beck Weathers and we went, oh, wow, that's amazing and also so sad. And then they go on with their thing. They're like, oh, yeah, well, then we attempted the summit. And it's so odd. They then go on to leave a woman who I believe was trying to be the oldest woman to summit Everest without supplemental oxygen. She was on her way down, and she didn't make it, and they've come under fire for leaving her as well. But again, to hear them tell it, obviously they rationalized it as she couldn't make it and they couldn't take her. The fact that they then went on to the summit rather than trying to take her down is a little weird, but it's their choice. And the body of one of those South African climbers is the body that Buchareve found years later, just hanging from the ropes. And cut through. It's just all these things interacting is mad.
Yes, it's sort of like you're on the mountain during one of the deadliest like blizzards and one of the deadliest seasons on Everest, and yet you're doing your climb.
Exactly, like you're just in your tent like, oh, this is a bad night.
Thank you for listening to The Other Marthas, the show where a drama student and a film graduate talk about things we have no business talking about. If you enjoyed this episode, please do subscribe to our channel for more.